he says these are the kinds of things you guys are batting around, and thought that I hopefully can learn a lot from you guys, but also maybe offer a few ideas that have come through my 25 years experience that might bring some value to the group. So just feel very honored to be here. Thank you, Hal, for inviting me. Thank the rest of you for allowing me to be a part of this. And I think that's, Wally, is that short enough? Is that brief enough?
That's good. So let's somehow or another, let's try to dive into this a little bit, Shaun.
Okay.
So
I think Wally wanted to say something, but his mic was muted. So
yeah, we'll see if he speaks.
We're good to go. It's excellent. I can't wait to hear from you.
all right, thanks, Wally.
So let's just dig into it a little bit, Shaun.
Okay. Where do you want to start, Hal?
Well, we started talking a couple of weeks ago, and with the Sharks earlier, about captains, team captains, and leadership, and I had discussed the fact that I have always struggled with how to do this, how to select them, and then how to train them, or how to mentor the captains and make sure that they're good leaders. And what that means, and so we've had some discussion on that, and then my next level of I don't want to call it frustration, but disappointment is my inability to develop a culture where those role players are just as actively engaged and valued in my locker room. Not so much valued by me, but valued by their teammates. And we've had some incidences of bullying. So we're dealing with, 14, 15, 16-year-old boys primarily. So I think there's an intersection between leadership and team culture that is very nuanced. You have to work at it pretty hard. And before you got on, Shaun, Wally was sort of wondering how much of it is player driven and how much of it is parent driven, and how do we deal with all these issues. So there's a big chunk of conversation. Maybe you can pick that apart a little bit, Shaun.
Well, prior to starting my mental skills practice, I worked with what at the time were known as the most at-risk teenagers in the communities that I was working in. So they were the kids on the street, they were the kids in group homes and running away from home and all form of addictions. And part of the reason that I decided to go down the athletes realm with regards to mental skill is because the same deficits I was seeing in the kids that were struggling in more intense ways, I was seeing in athletes. And so here's a couple of things I've learned over 35 years working with kids. And number one is that most kids, when they think about leadership, they associate it with popularity. I don't know that they necessarily have a framework for what leadership really means. And where a lot of young people bump into problems with leadership is because they lack social courage. And the social courage is lacking because belonging and the need for belonging is so high that they'll compromise who they are in order for the perception of belonging, even if the compromise takes away their authenticity. They'd rather belong inauthentically than be potentially rejected authentically. And so when you pull a group of young people together on a hockey team and we talk about leadership, I think we need to talk about people skills as a focus for the whole team. And then as people skills are developed, then I think you find out who your most socially courageous and skilled individuals are. And then that is an opportunity to maybe train or give them opportunities to lead within the context the environment that we're creating as a whole. I don't believe that in most cases that coaches can take a back seat to this. I think coaches have to set the stage for social courage to be executed by laying out expectations, by setting clear roles and guidelines, and then in, like Hal, you talked about, including role players more with regards to contribution to the team. And I think if the coach sets the role and affirms the contribution, that the team is more likely to follow than to expect them to appreciate it before the coach affirms it. So I've always believed that contribution and affirmation is the key to connecting. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of teams where the top 6 forwards, the top 4 defensemen, and the goalies get a lot of the reinforcement, and the rest of the team is kind of left to figure it out to themselves. In the youth programs, if teammates are also friends outside of the team, then I think that when coaches or when leaders within the team don't affirm the role players, then the coach or the leaders lose the respect of the higher end players, because that's their friends that are being left out, not just their teammates. So I don't know. Those are a few thoughts that if you want to kind of riff on that a little bit, Hal, that would be kind of fun.
Well, I'd like to pass it around to some of the other guys on the call because they're all have a lot of experience also.
I have a question on that. You talk about role players. I don't. You're developing players to play all roles and earn roles that suit them best by the end of the season. And to me, the problem is coaches shorten the bench, ignore the so-called role that we're labeling role players, and they're being left out. And nobody says anything because winning is all that matters. And I think I'm just saying the example here of the Edmonton Oilers finally getting something out of their role players because they're playing. The minutes of ice time have vastly been reduced by the top players and increased by the role players. So I think bench management, which is a part of a coach's philosophy, accepting that is what's lacking in a culture. And I don't like taking it into a political norm, but it is that. It's individualism versus socialism. And I think at times that causes dissension because people think politically rather than morally and personally. So I don't know if that goes anywhere, but I think it's the nuts and bolts. Hal, when we talked earlier, you were talking about players and the idea of social courage and how do players get to feel valued? Well, they feel valued if they're valued and have a role. So that's just my thoughts and questioning on that. It gets down to plain and simple bench management to develop and compete. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, Shaun, in your experience with working with these different ages, like I said, I just started working with a youth organization last year, kind of did more observing and listening in that. And one of the things I saw, so most of the parents are in their mid to late 30s and early to mid 40s right now in the in youth hockey. And so our coaches fall into that category as well. And one of the things that I'm going to do with them this fall is I'm going to ask them to take the words selflessness, motivation, and discipline, give me definitions, and then examples of how those apply in real life, not talking about athletics, just how they apply in real life. Because I want to get a sense of the kids are a reflection of their parents, right? When it comes to a lot of different things, because you learn what your parents tell you. So once I get that idea from them, then I want to see how they would apply that to athletics, in our case, hockey, just to see how that, like, how does that actually come across? Like, will they be able to define in the real world, like daily lives, working with other people, whatever their jobs are, what selflessness is, what's motivation, discipline? Are they going to be able to do that? So I guess one of my questions for you is, with the coaches in their 30s and 40s, do you do much of that? How equipped does it seem like they are to be able to do the things like Wally's talking about, the shortening the benches and not having things in maybe the right perspective necessarily, depending. I mean, you're doing AAA, right? You're getting paid. It tends to be a different story. But in the development process of these kids, how much of a mindset do these coaches have of exactly what Wally's talking about?
So if I understand your question, Peter, it's what's the level of maturation and or skills within a 30-year-old, 35-year-old parent to work within a youth organization or work with a coach within a youth organization and understand the philosophy and the ideas that Wally just shared. Is that what you're asking?
Exactly. And what responsibility does that youth organization have in mentoring those coaches in those concepts?
Well, the question you're asking is huge, quite frankly. I mean, I would say that most of the youth organizations that I've participated with and tried to partner with, most of the coaches that are coaching are parent coaches.
Yeah.
And therefore they have a dual role, one of which is to have a kid on the team oftentimes, and then to try to coach their kid's team, which I think is actually virtually impossible to do without hurting somebody. And I think the youth organization has an incredible responsibility to share the philosophy of the entire organization and then pass it down into the coaches. Unfortunately, I don't know that there is a lot of accountability for when that is happening, and then accountability for training and or development when it isn't happening. So I think the idea of trying to get some shared meaning around important ideas with the parents so that when you coach their kids and you do things that are in alignment with those three concepts, you may not share the same meaning of what that stuff means, but at least you're communicating clearly about what your intent is and how they can frame the decisions that you make with regards to their kids.
Yeah, that was my hope, that we'd be able to do that, because, the best thing about youth sports is volunteerism. The worst thing about youth sports is volunteerism.
That's exactly right.
You get what you pay for.
You'll probably find, Peter, that 20% of your parents will track with you. 20% of them won't have a clue what you're trying to do, and the rest of them will be silent about it. That's been my experience over the years.
And one or two of them will be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and the one or two will be the voices that they'll be calling you all the time, trying to have you explain why you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Shaun, I'd like to mention that up here at the U13 level, we try to get non-parent coaches, but we have two sets of parent coaches. They're technically and I think ethically very good. We are looking for a third coach, but it looks like we're getting another parent coach that hopefully fits the ethical standards. When I'm talking about that, is managing the bench for development and competing. Above that level, we don't have parent coaches. Do we have grief? Yes, we do. And I like what you said about the importance of the organization having a philosophy, reinforcing and developing a culture that matches what we're talking about. And I think I've always used the term inmates running the asylum. Well, they're that 10% that usually leave an organization when it's not good enough for them to find greener pastures. They're going from one team to another. They're going from one system to a private system, thinking it'll be better, when in fact, wherever they go, the same problem occurs. The bench is shortened. The roles of players are identified too soon, and players don't feel a part of the team. Reinforcing what I'm saying about their social courage to feel valued and speak up. Nobody dares to speak up. We call it Speak Out here, and Hockey Canada has a program to speak out on bullying, to speak out on harassment. And I think that a course in it hasn't really helped so much, but a lot more work needs to be done. So go ahead, anybody else here? And Hal, I sure appreciating hearing from you, having gleaned everything over the years with us and what we're talking about to this point.
Well, as I think all of us are trying to change the hockey world, and I certainly spent a lot of time and energy trying to do it through USA Hockey and coach education programs and so on and so forth, and even in my local programs. And I've finally come to the conclusion, not suddenly, but that the only thing I really have control over is the environment that I'm in, the team I'm coaching, and hopefully, a little bit of it will rub off on other teams in our organization, which I think might be happening a little bit. And so I think we can only do so much. When I mentioned role players in the early part of the conversation, I didn't mean it with any disrespect, because I don't shorten benches. And I've always tried to really recognize the kids that are doing the things on the ice in the game that I think are so important, other than scoring goals and other than those things that most everybody focuses on, because it takes 5 guys to score a goal, not one. And helping kids understand that they can actually play a lot harder away from the puck. And the Oilers are going to show this, I think, that by incorporating more players into the lineup and valuing them, they're probably going to win the Stanley Cup, and or they're going to give it a good run. So to me, coaching is the culture you create in the locker room and around your team is so important to, number one, avoiding a lot of the problems that exist. Especially when you get up to that what are Bannon's U15, 15 and under, those kids are, they quit listening to their parents quite so much, and you can create a culture that they want to be part of, that they value, and they will protect their culture. And now what happens the next year? They probably go back to a different culture. Go to high school, everybody thinks at high school the only thing that matters here is winning games. And I'm not so sure they're right. So I think at high school, Shaun was helping me with high school, and we had a B team in an A league, and we did pretty darn well over the years, really well. But it was always about the culture we created, and making everybody part of the process, and part of the success, part of the failures on the ice, and the coaches. I never separated myself and my staff from the team. We win, we lose, we tie, we learn together. And I probably figured in high school I was spending 800 to 1,000 hours a year on my team, and that's a lot of hours. So, Shaun, do you want to pitch in at all, or?
Peter's got his hand up here. Peter?
Yeah, along with that, when we were talking there about the coaches and that earlier, one of the things that I did that worked out really well with this organization I work with is I instituted a monthly coaches meeting where I had, I still have ties with the university where I coach. So I'd bring them to campus in the conference room. They like being on a college campus and that, and we would meet every month, and it was pretty good. Small organization, so with head coaches and assistants, there's probably around 25 coaches total, and we got anywhere from 17 to 20 pretty much on a regular basis attending. And what I found was, because they're all over the place, like there are police officers, there are people in the tech industry, the service industry, right? Plumbers, electricians, educators, all that. But once we got them in that room and they all began talking, because the whole idea was I'd have some sort of a topic that we would talk about, but I'd always make sure that sort of bled into them just kind of talking about how their season's going, practices, issues that they have, and getting them on board with understanding, and hopefully them understanding, like really sort of the Hal's point about a team, a group, them realizing they are a team, because we always talked about that. And that hopefully then now trickles through. And in some it did, and some they were just there. And it wasn't like there was a room full of experts. There were a few experts in there, in their minds anyway, for sure. And it was great to have the conversation. So I think that, again, I always harp on that. I think that's kind of my big thing is, if you're not prepared to be a leader and understand what that is, how are you going to pass that on to the kids? And I even see that too at the NCAA level, because there are a lot of younger guys who are excited and they get that opportunity. And I spent a fair amount of time talking to their assistants, asking them, so what kind of things does coach do to help you, even in the off season, because there are seminars and things like that you can go to. What kind of things do you guys do to get educated so you're on the same page to understand leadership? And it's surprising how little of that goes on. And I'm not talking like at Division I level, because I think there's a different type of commitment there. I mean, Division II, Division III. I'm surprised at how little education the head coaches are passing on to their assistants. And maybe that's because, again, we've got that, not to pick on an age group, but we've got that 30s to 40s who maybe themselves haven't had a lot of that kind of training.
So just before Shaun chips in, that book I shared with you guys, Jeff Jansen's Team Captains, the Leadership Manual, and I started using that 15 years ago, maybe, exactly for the reason what Peter's talking about, is if I appoint or the kids elect captains, I mean, who in the world would put somebody in a position of leadership with no training, no mentoring, no conversation? Well, I see it in business. In my day job, I see this every day, and it's very ineffective when people get put in leadership positions with no clue on really what their job is. And so at the high school level, we had a monthly meeting with not only the captains, but the captains were allowed to, or were asked to invite other players into that group that they thought would be good leaders and good supporters of what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm now working with younger players and have not had captains the last year. Last time we did it with Bantams, all hell broke out. I asked all the players, in your experience, who becomes the captains on the team? And the kids go, "Oh, that's simple." And so who? I says, "Well, the coach's kid is always the captain." So, well, my kid's 30 years old, so I don't think he's going to be the captain. And so we really had some terrific conversations. So I don't know there's a magic bullet in any of this other than getting your players together and the parents together and having some really meaningful conversations about all this stuff. They're not all going to agree. At some point, as the leader, you have to make decisions. But at least everybody's had their say. They have the right to freely express their opinions and their preferences. And ironically, 2 years ago, the players wanted me to pick the captains, but I asked them to all send me 3 names. And I would do it out of that group. I would kind of rank them, but ultimately it was my decision. And that's what they wanted. They didn't want to have a straight up vote. So I thought that was interesting. So that's kind of the way we went with it. So
How close did they come to who you would have chosen?
they were good. That's an interesting question here, because I know going way back, 25 years coaching Bantams, I did this one year. That was the team that had Blake Wheeler on it, who plays for the Rangers now and whatever. And I asked my captains 4 tryouts. I got them into a room and I said, "Here's a white piece of paper and a pen. I want you to list who should be on this hockey team. And don't talk to each other. And I'm not going to look at it." We looked at it after tryouts. The kids know. They know who should be on the team and who shouldn't be on the team. And we didn't get it as a coach. I did not pick it 100% correctly, according to them. And in hindsight, they were right and I was wrong.
Did they all pick?
It's always that last 1 or 2 kids, right?
I just want to interrupt here because I have never seen head coaches, son or daughter, wear a letter. And and you prevent that because at the elite level here, we don't allow parent coaches.
Yeah.
But even growing up and watching all this, I found that selection of captains is, it is a difficult thing to do, but the coach has to be the driver in that process. And ideally, he has to really survey. But in the end, he's going to make the decision, as every head coach does, about whatever decisions, whatever leadership group he's going to create. I think once you pick them, what do you do with them during the season? And that's a critical part of it. So, Shaun, can you elaborate on anything here?
Well, I've had a lot. So I've never head coached a team. I've worked collaboratively with many other head coaches over the years, and leadership always comes up as a topic for conversation. And so I've had to develop some ideas that I've tested. Some I haven't tested, so I don't know the validity of them. Until you test them, you don't know the validity of them. But what I have determined is that I think of leadership on a hockey team in the same way I think about interviewing for a job. after hockey. If there's a job or if there's an opportunity, then whoever wants to interview for the job should get a chance to do it. And that means that the job description has to be clear, and the measurements and the metrics for success need to be defined. Because more often than not, people are chosen or identified as leaders, but they don't know what job they're doing. They don't know what success looks like. And the opportunity to develop them in a leadership role is missed, mostly because clarity is lacking. So I've determined that my philosophy of leadership boils down to influence. If you want to be a great leader, you better be someone who can influence another person. And that means that you have to know exactly what the standards are that the team is trying to uphold. And then when that leader functions and upholds those standards, they need to be heard, acknowledged, and understood. And when they lacked or missed an opportunity to uphold the standard, then they need to be corrected and or empowered and or trained but if you don't have a structure for them to have clarity around, it's pretty hard to know who your leaders are just by feel and just by sense. And in the hockey teams that I've collaborated with, I see that there's on ice leaders, and they're usually the most skilled players on the team that get, but there's also there's another form of leadership, especially at the youth level, and that is the kids that are really good with other people. And they may not be the better, more skilled players, but they're actually really good in the locker room, and you need them on the team in order to create cohesion. So I worked with a high school program one time in the States, and I said, I'd like to share with you an idea for how to choose your captains. And coach said, okay, what's your idea? I said, create a job description, post it like you would if you were in the real world. And anyone who wants to interview for it, tell them when the interview times are, and tell them that they need to interview for it in front of their teammates. They need to come and tell their teammates why they should be given the job of captain or leader or however they're defining it. And then let the team have some say as to who they thought interviewed the best. It's not the coach has the final say, but the team is the one who's going to be led by these people. So if they don't have any say, then maybe the one that they would have been led by was missed and they didn't have a say in it. And so then there's a missed opportunity there. So those are some thoughts I have, mostly about clarity, specificity, accountability, training, and understanding, at least at the youth level, leadership boiling down to the capacity to influence. And the more skills that they have in being able to influence, I think the better leaders, at least at the beginning, they become.
Do you have a copy of a job description for a leadership group?
I have one probably somewhere in my files that I could pull up.
Well, I think it's an excellent idea. If you can share it with me, I like the idea. I'm just not sure. I'm looking to see, will the players ask questions of the potential captain? Have you ever interviewed more than everybody else, the people that wanted to be leaders at once, if it was a group of 3 or 5?
Interestingly enough, Wally, the ones that needed kind of some encouragement to interview were the ones that were the leaders. They were the ones that the team had to encourage them to interview because the team told them that they thought they were good leaders. And hey, Hal, do you remember Billy Lear?
Yeah.
He was one of the guys that interviewed. He actually put a speech together for his hockey team that he presented to his team to be a leader. It was one of the most impressive things I'd ever seen. And so in answer to your question, Wally, I think that I do have a job description that I put together a while back that I'd be more than happy to share with you.
Thank you. What I like to do is provide tools,
Yeah.
mentoring coaches, and any elaboration of what you've talked about. I'm editing this portion of it because I've never heard of it. It really makes sense. And the fact that some leaders will not stand up and interview because they are in the background and they provide leadership through their behaviors.
They misread their influence capacity because of the label of leader, and they don't understand that they are leaders because they are influential, but they don't see the correlation.
So does that mean that you need to have some conversations with them, you know, in regards to that, Shaun? I mean, we did this at Providence for a number of years also, and every year we seem to do it a little bit differently based on the group of kids that we had. But I think putting together the job description is excellent, but maybe some conversation about the different styles of leadership. The servant leader, the quiet leader, the noisy leader, the on ice leader, the locker room leader, that kind of stuff.
The tension reliever, those kinds of things.
One of the things that's so interesting about all of this, and I always tell our players, we're going to go through this process, and you may never go through it again in the rest of your life. In your working career, most companies don't do this kind of stuff, and so this is going to be, you're going to look back 10 years from now and go, all right, now I got a situation here in my day job. I learned something about this playing hockey and from my hockey, experience. So anyways.
Hal, I just like to, we're having this conversation. We perceive what we're talking about.
Yeah.
30 to 40-year-old coach, do they have that perception and an awareness of it to address it? In your experience, Peter, you can mention, because that's what you're faced with. Given what he said about the job description, if this was shared with your coaches, Peter, it might be an idea. I'm more interested in experiment with this with coaches down the road, not ourselves experiment with it in our unique environments, because we will have more success than most because of our experience. But I'm just thinking the tools that the coach needs are the same as the fundamental tools of playing that an athlete needs. And we're talking leadership that doesn't happen in the real business world. And there's billions of dollars being applied in that regard.
Yep.
So that's the situation here.
The best way to decrease engagement is to increase confusion. So if we want greater amounts of engagement with our players on anything, psychologically, physically, mentally, we have to be very attentive to the details that increase one's clarity. And like right now, the question I get asked all the time with every player is, Shaun, how do I strengthen my confidence? And certainly there's a competence factor that leads to an increase in confidence. But right now, if I had 1,000 coaches in front of me and they said, Shaun, what's the biggest thing you've learned over 25 years working with thousands of players? It's we as a leadership group that is trying to develop young people to be more engaged and to practice with more intentionality and to be more motivated by, we need to be more clear and we need to give more immediate feedback, and we need to make the feedback in 10 to 15 second increments no longer, because the attention span doesn't support feedback that goes any further beyond 10 to 15 seconds.
And we're talking players here, not coaches.
We're talking coaches and players. So what did you say, Hal?
Oh, well, yeah, coach attention is pretty short too.
Exactly.
I love it.
How,
It
Shaun,
relates-
how much have you run into? Because I've always got this feeling that if your ego is as big or bigger than you, you're never going to be able to learn. I think once you can put your ego aside and be excited about the fact that you can learn something from everyone in every situation, then you can move on and grow. And that's one of the things that I saw this past season with some youth coaches is they feel like, all right, I'm the head coach. That means I should know everything, which is completely not the case, because some of them, it might be a first year, some it might be a second year, some they might be moving up to a level that they haven't coached before. So the ability for them as individuals to sort of check your ego at the door and just be excited and listen to everyone and know that you can learn from everyone is so huge. And again, hopefully they learn that and then they can pass that on to their players, where you got the kid who, only feels like they're successful when they're scoring a goal, right? They're the best. So they got the answer because they're scoring a goal. But what are they doing when they're not scoring a goal? That kind of, how that all kind of plays together a bit.
Tom Malloy.
Yeah, this just reminds me of one situation where I didn't do what Shaun's saying to do, and didn't get any player input at all. So anyways, it was with the Mount Royal women's team, and we'd done really well, either first or second every year. So anyways, I had this one player that she'd scored a couple of goals a year, and I didn't, think of her as a leader whatsoever. And so anyways, she got a concussion and missed a month. And we didn't win a game in a month. We lost as many games in that month as I'd lost my previous 3 years. We lost 9 games in a row, which was incredible for us. And she came back and we started winning again. And then in the playoffs, she set a record for goals. We were using a torpedo and she was a left winger, so she was on that side all the time. But anyway, she scored 12 goals in the playoffs and we lost in the league final. And after I thought, she's the most valuable player on our team. And I think if I would have gone to the players, like you said, and said, who is the leader here? Because I remember one playoff, she had a thing about pulling on the rope and all this kind of stuff. She ran it, and I kind of thought, well, why would she be doing that? But anyways, that's fine. But it's such a good idea what you're saying is find out who the players think would be the leader, and this kind of thing. And I think that in my coaching, I have had the wrong captain various times, and one of the worst things you can ever do is have the wrong captain, especially if you're coaching girls hockey, because you don't go in the room and they can change the entire room. So anyways, this is really good stuff, I just want to say.
Shaun, I'd just like to mention, I'm relating it to the Edmonton Oilers. Tom, what's the name of the forward that scored the shorthanded goals?
Connor Brown.
Connor Brown. Like, they interviewed him, and all I saw in that interview was leadership. Behind the scenes leadership that is now showing up on the ice. And I think in that organization, in that NHL culture, the most talented players are given the C in some cases, and this was the case. And in this is my observation, is that Connor McDavid is a demonstrative leader by his play, and he's now leading by example. He's respecting different ice times, raised his level of performance, and everybody else is playing more, feeling valued. And when we talk about minor hockey, we're talking about the NHL. Everybody wants to play. And the same is true at the NHL. You don't win by overplaying the best players. You win by creating a culture, a team culture that transmits belief. Everybody earns a role and plays a role and feels valued. And I think both Florida and Edmonton are two teams, and most teams that get to the finals at this point, their minutes are much more balanced than teams that never made the playoffs. So for minor hockey coaches and parents out there who think shortening is the bench is the way to win, and parents to tell their children who they should be playing with and complain to coaches, it goes totally against the grain of creating a winning culture. I just wanted to throw that in there, and it just all connects. I just don't separate pro hockey from minor hockey.
Well, I think to your point, I think it's easy though too at the youth level. Again, if you're a coach and let's say you have some experience, but you're not the experience, obviously, as somebody like yourself, it's easy to just put the best player out there, right? That's a quick solution. Well, I want to win. I'll just put the best player out there and see if that works. And if it works, you probably keep doing that because it's easier than creating the culture that you are talking about, which you're 100% correct. If we're really trying to develop these boys and girls as athletes and as people. So I think that's part of the trap too for younger coaches is it's just easier to do.
Well, I think it's a trap door that people fall into, thinking you just look at the final results of teams that are champions, and it's the culture that's created by that team to play and accept the roles they've been given. But everybody feels valued and will accept whatever role they have, and that's the art of coaching.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I can think in five instances just off the top of my head where I've had third line players, score winning goals or critical goals in games that led us on to the next, whether it's a state championship or even in national tournaments. The player that, might not have played so much on other teams and ended up scoring, I think, in 3 games, critical goals, and he was a defenseman. So, you got to play them all. And if you're a smart coach, you can manage that ice time effectively. But they all have to have a chance to play in critical situations, in man up, man down, late in the game, games on the line. How are they ever going to learn? And so it's a delicate balance for sure. And so what we do here is the playoffs start in February. And so, everybody gets a shot at everything until playoffs. And my goal is that in playoffs, I can just run 3 lines, pretty equally through that. And we got this last year where we got shorted. Our last 2 games were against teams we'd beaten twice during the season, and one of them they only played 6 forwards, maybe 5, and 3 defensemen. We just played all our players, and they beat us by a goal in the end. And And then that team went on and got killed in the next round. So I've seen that happen a couple times too. So
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the championships we've been fortunate to win or be a part of, everybody always played.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, when you're in that room, when you're in the room and you won, obviously there's that feeling. But when you're in that room and you've lost, but everyone has had an opportunity,
yep.
the way those players come together after that game is just incredible.
I mean, that happened to us this last year, and with a group of kids prior year in the district had only won 1 out of 42 games. And here we are trying to win well, we play 14 games and then we have playoffs. And there they are, they're 1 game away from advancing out of the districts into regionals. These kids had never won before. We played them all. We went to the locker room and they were all in tears.
Guys, I'd like to relate a story about what we're reinforcing here. The Olympics in 2002, I was on that coaching staff, and I would not take the job in the interview unless everybody played all situations in the first half year.
Mhm.
And I mentioned the creation of a power play units and PK units of 10 and 10 was ideal in the post second half of the season. And they agreed to it. And I believe it contributed to winning a gold medal. When I coached 2 years before that, a club team at the University of Calgary that had potential Olympians on it. I had 2 Olympians that played in that gold medal game on the team that won the national championship. Basically rolling the lines with only 2 national players on it against a team that had 9. So you've all experienced the greater success that you've had. Doesn't necessarily mean you win. But when you shorten the bench at U10 in the last minute and put out the best player and take off the second line player, the emotional effect of that on the rest of the team and that player, it can't go ignored.
You're right.
That's win-win coaching. And I'm not sure, Shaun, if you're familiar with the Positive Coaching Alliance, but I've used them in that particular concept of win-win coaching and everybody feeling a part of it. And you might lose. And I saw a situation happen it was U11 hockey. After the Olympics, I watched my nephew's son playing in a U11 game, a team that had 1 ringer, but they rolled the lines all the way. They were down a goal with a minute left, and they put out the ringer and took off my nephew's son. And I said to him, that's lose-lose coaching. They'll likely lose the game and lose the spirit of the player that got pulled off or everyone else. Win-win coaching would have been to left him out there and give him an opportunity to build his confidence. Is winning that game at that moment more important? You have to make that call. So I think that's where we really have to stand by our principles and what we believe in, and the players have to know what we believe in and respect that, as do their parents. And it's called integrity. I mean, do things the right way, win or lose, and you can always look in the mirror.
Well, this is all great stuff, Wally. We've been at it for an hour. Shaun, how's your time?
I'm good. I wanna say something that hopefully highlights what we've been talking about, and that is, developmentally speaking, or the developmental challenge of each age group of kids that we coach, we need to understand what the task is for that age group. So if you're dealing with teenagers, they're struggling for autonomy. If you're dealing with older kids, then mastery becomes a part of it. But I wrote down 3 concepts that I think are really important for all of us, including myself and other coaches, to really dig deep into. And that is, we need to understand the correlation between playing time, execution, and or performance, and contribution. Young people right now, when they play a sport, regardless of what their current skill level is, when they walk away from the game or they walk away from practice, what they're asking themselves is, did I make a difference today? Did I do something that contributed to the goal or the perceived accomplishment of the whole? If I walk away, or if a young person walks away because the bench was shortened, or because they didn't get feedback that they were looking for, or they're going to walk away and their level of engaging energy the next time they show up is going to be diminished. If they were out playing or executing on, during the game, and somebody came up to them and said, hey, the gap that you had on that last play is one of the reasons why the turnover happened. And doesn't matter where they're playing in the lineup. If they walked away and they got feedback that they could then see, I contributed, I did something productive in support of the goals that this team has, that's what most young people are looking for from the group experiences. Did I make a difference? Did my involvement, my engagement, my play, whether it was 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes, did I do something today that I can walk away from and say, I made a difference today? And I did it in front of my peers. It wasn't that I just did it alone or I just did it in the backyard. I actually made a difference in what my team, my peers were trying to accomplish, and I had a significant role in that. I think playing time becomes, it's certainly important because you got to give people a chance to play and develop. But if you get playing time without feedback, then you're walking away blind just with more playing time. And when I have kids on calls with me talking to me about the mental challenges that they're facing, one of the most often talked about things they talk about is, I don't get any feedback. I don't know, did I make a difference? Did I do what I was supposed to? Did I not do what I was supposed to? And they wonder at times, should I even show up tomorrow? What's the point? So I just wanted to say that to, again, bring clarity and dive deep into these concepts of what's important to kids and what extracts and engages them productively. It's the feeling of contribution, acknowledgement, and feedback.
Shaun, I'd like to mention something we've talked about for the past number of years related to feedback. Feedback has evolved from yelling to telling, and yelling and telling, and usually pointing out mistakes, which coaches are really good at. We all see mistakes. But what we want them to do is identify those specific moments of, like you said, the gap control, the poke check, the angle, the block shot. Those little details are beyond the comprehension, I would say, of over 70% of amateur coaches. And even good ones tend to just focus on the best players and don't detect the really important little things that lead to winning, like that gap control, creating a turnover to create the rush going the other way. And I think the Socrates method of coaching now is going from yelling to telling to asking. In the case of mistake, what could you have done differently? What did you see? And being able to, the art of coaching at the right stuff, the right amount, the right time, more work on providing specific recognition of good performance, detailed, not just good job, hard work, well done, fabulous, pat in the back. Say the specific that you want to reinforce to them. And don't be afraid to point it out loud enough for others to hear.
It's interesting you should say that, Wally, when parents, they'll say, man, I can't get my kids to do their homework. I can't get them to do that. I go, well, how often do you nag them? Well, they say, I nag them all the time. I go, did you know that nagging actually trains your kids to forget, not remember? And it's the same thing with coaching. If you point out mistakes all the time and then you are noticing imperfection, and then you wonder why we have perfectionists out there as hockey players, because they're trying to please their coaches by being perfect, because a lot of coaches are just pointing out imperfect play. It just facilitates and fosters a mental mindset of perfectionism, which increases anxiety and decreases creativity and all that kind of stuff.
So awesome.
Excellent.
What'd you say, Hal?
So awesome. That's why I love you.
Yeah, Shaun, your languaging and the points you bring out in terms of, they're academic, but they're simple and they make sense. And most of us work with coaches, and a lot of Tom, who's still coaching, coaches are learning from watching him, particularly in his practices. But I really think that I really love the way you're communicating. I went on the website and I looked at the number of articles you've written. They're simple, to the point, and I'm going to share them. And I do want you to share that document on having potential leaders. Would you explain that again? That assignment of having them fill out a form or answer a question and be interviewed by their team.
You said you'd like me to explain that again?
Yes, if you could.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Wally, for the kind words. I appreciate it. I guess where I start is that any opportunity to serve as a leader starts with understanding what the job is. So I believe in creating a clear description of what job the leader is asked to fulfill. That job should define also what it looks like to be successful, and what the responsibilities are. And then when it's time and leaders are going to be given an opportunity to, in a sense, interview for the job, then it's my belief that they should present their case in front of their coaches and their teammates based on the expectations of the job. And that feedback should then be given by the team and the coaches to determine who interviewed the best, or who seemed most prepared for the opportunity and the privilege that it is to lead. And I think part of the value of it holistically is that we all got to interview for something in our life at some point. We're interviewing our spouses, potential spouses. We're interviewing for jobs. We're interviewing for opportunities. And the better we get at acknowledging who we are, noticing opportunities where we think we can succeed, I think the more broad range valuable participating in a youth sport becomes.
I wonder if Tom is still on. Tom, are you still on?
Yep.
Your hands up. And as Shaun was
Oh,
talking,
sorry. Sorry, I didn't take it down.
Tom, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You talked about the player that you realized was really your leader that led the scoring on your team at the end of the year. Now, I'm curious about this sheet that Shaun's going to share. Would you consider using that in terms of selecting captains, or is U15 too young?
I have to look at it more carefully. But yeah, it's, you know, I imagine I would consider, based on our conversation here, you know, that, like I said, it's a really important thing to have the right leader. And you need to train people to do things. And I don't think very many of us train our captains how to be captains, or really see them demonstrate their leadership capacity, like the interview idea and these sort of things. So I think it's a really good idea. I've done what Hal said he did. I would, common thing I do is I ask each player only by themselves, so nobody else hears, give me five players you think would make good captains. And then I'm the only one that has that. Then I ask the coaches the same thing. Then I look at that to, you know, come up with a short list, maybe talk to the other coaches about it and select the captain from that. But, you know, this seems to be a better way that Shaun's talking about, and Hal.
I think it's great.
Well, I'm going to share that with coaches moving forward, and hopefully somebody takes it on. You know, we're all creatures of habit. We continue to do things the way we've always done it. And I think it's really important to experiment. And this is something I think when a coach does it, it's for themselves. And how does it work? How does it affect the choice? And how do you follow up with it in terms of ongoing communication to breed better leadership? So outstanding having you on, Shaun, today. And we've only gone about an hour and a half. We usually go, I've been in sessions where we've gone 3 hours, but I have a question here. How did you guys meet? And then how did you get reconnected?
Are you talking about Hal and myself?
Yes.
Wally?
Yeah.
Didn't we meet at a USA Hockey event a while back, Hal?
Yeah, but that's a possibility. And then I think back, I'm going to say about 15 years ago, my high school team only won 9 games, and the parents were very concerned. And their solution was we should hire a team psychologist. And I said, I'm good with that. And I would like to embellish on this a little bit. One of the things that we did, you know, and I connected with Shaun and we did this, but Shaun does because he works with individual players, he does an athlete assessment, or it's a psychological.
It's a mental skills. It's a mental skills assessment that gives clarity as to each individual's strengths mentally and vulnerabilities, and it puts it in language that's very clear and easy to understand.
And so we did that for all the players on the varsity and JV, and actually as a coach, I was fascinated by them because the other thing I did is I also had my son take it. He didn't play for me, and then I took it also. And I can tell you that my son, who is an extremely competitive human being, is very different as a competitor than I am. And when you start seeing the results of kids who are highly self-critical or not self-critical, but are impacted by criticism from the out. I mean, there were so many things in there that, as from a coaching perspective, it made it so much easier for me to have conversations with my players. And I can remember with one high school boy, I go, this is amazing. And I go, have you shared this with your parents? And they went, oh no. But you know, if you've been coaching a long time, there are things that you know that you can see a player and you sense, you see repeated things over and over and over again. But then to see it in black and white on some sort of a, you know, profile was very helpful. And then over the years, Wally, I have sent players to Shaun. And in fact, the one player that you worked with was a Bantam player about 12, 13 years ago. And it turned out to be the parents that you ended up spending some time with the parents of the player, because that's where the problems were coming from. The family, I don't know if I told you, Shaun, but at the end of the season, the dad said to me, thank you. You saved our family.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so this is pretty deep stuff. You know, it's something that a lot of coaches don't take the time or energy to do. But, you know, for those people that are on the call here, I will just I'll give you my recommendation that if you've got any opportunities and funds available to engage with Shaun in your programs, it'll be money well spent, and you'll learn a lot, and your program will be better as a result of it, because he and I are going to collaborate this year with my Bantam team, I believe, and I'm super looking forward to really personally becoming better as a coach through the process.
Shaun, very early when you came on, I brought up the issue that Hal has identified, parents. And the one player that we didn't want to share it with his parents, that is the issue, is being open and honest with one another. And, you know, the old Covey principle of don't say anything to anybody you wouldn't say to, you know, it's an open door. And if the parents can't get in that door, we're creating that separation. We're contributing to the problem. So, do you have any other ideas of how to improve that communication gap and trust gap?
Well, I've worked with parents for the better part of almost 40 years of my professional life. And I do have a lot of, I think, pretty dialed in thoughts about parents. The first question I always ask coaches who tell me they have parents that may be problematic is I ask the coach, and I try to do it kindly and not tersely, but I ask the coach, in what way are you complicit for the frustrations your parents have?
No.
Like, how are you contributing to the very frustration that you're trying to get rid of? And most parents are pretty fair. Most parents are generally pretty healthy. There's, you know, certainly always a couple that are a little on the unhealthy side and need to be managed. But unfortunately, we tend to set policy around the 1% instead of the 99%. And the number one challenge that coaches have with parents is they don't know necessarily what parents are looking for from their experience in hockey. And most of the time it's clear communication, Most of the time it's let me know the rules up front and follow through on what you're going to do. And honestly, this sounds really simplistic, but do you even care about my kid? Like, do you do you get to know them outside of the actual game of hockey? Do you know do you know who their friends are? Do you know what they like to do outside of hockey? Do you take the time, and are you curious about them as a person, or are you just seeing them as a hockey player and that's it? And if some of those I's are dotted and T's are crossed, then a good portion of conflict tends to go away for parents. And then oftentimes coaches will have me come in and do a parent meeting before the season starts, because I have a way of, I think, articulating the value proposition of a lot of the things that the coaches are doing in a language that is more holistic than just sports related. And oftentimes it helps parents conceptualize or contextualize what's happening, and it reduces the possible angst when there's clear, specific, strategic understanding behind why Coach A is doing whatever they're doing. And that's quite frankly how I think why you and I really worked well together is we were able to articulate in very clear ways the value proposition beyond just the hockey rink for the kids. And I think most parents saw that. And because of that, we had very little conflict during those years that we were working together.
For sure. For sure.
Shaun, down the road, I don't know if it's a possibility, but Hal, you're familiar with the mission statement exercise I've
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And when you talked about what you do with parents and what you've just said here, really, really makes sense. The problem is largely with the coaches. They have to provide the leadership in improving communication and creating a relationship of trust and respect. And the mission statement exercise we've created in 1970 at the request of Hockey Canada, but it slipped through the cracks. Every coach was going to be educating and delivering it, which was really to understand the purpose of what we were there for, and that is the process of development and growing in terms of the life skills and the athletic skills to be the best you can be in what you're trying to do. But what you've said, I really believe I like, because coaches don't communicate well with parents, and the managers are usually the buffer. You talk to them, the coach doesn't hear about it. And in that case, when you worked with Hal, were you a buffer, or did you and Hal work with them together?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think Hal, did you hear the question that Wally asked? You're on mute, Hal.
Yep. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a little of each.
I think every group of coaches, when I look at over the years, when I think about the training sessions that are provided for coaches to increase their ability to coach, I've been a part of a lot of USA Hockey coaching consortiums. I've never ever once seen a lesson on basic communication. Have you, Hal? I mean, I don't think I've ever seen one on here's communication 101.
No, they don't provide it. When I was a speaker at the level 3s and 4s, my topic was the role of the coach.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here today, and all the rest of the presentations are about power play, penalty kill,
right?
And ironically, never about fundamental skating.
No.
Well, I'd like to mention, Shaun, what I've been recommending probably for 5 years now, since that mission statement exercise slipped through the cracks in the late 1980s and was not put into a application for all coach certification to give them the tool to communicate with their group about what they're doing and how they're going to do it and getting everybody on the same page. It slipped through the cracks. And I really believe, I think there's a need at USA Hockey, all sports organizations, for ethical coaching modules, which fall under what you talk about, fall under that umbrella,
Mhm.
communication. The two words to me that are the essence of good leadership and coaching and teaching is trust and respect. And if you can create that, then you're going to have a far more positive hockey experience, sporting experience, teaching experience, and being authentic in terms of caring about the people you teach, coach, or work with. That's respect. So ethical coaching modules, and I agree with you, actual modules on communication and some tools at better communication, tools at learning how to ask questions, to listen. We all need work at that. So
I wrote a book for parents called The Difference Makers, and it's about a 50-page book on the principles and practices of being a difference-making parent, which could be very practical for coaching as well. But then I supported it with 100 unique questions that are intended to express a degree of curiosity into the life of your own kid that have nothing to do with their performance and have nothing to do with how well they played the game, so that parents could have ammunition for the ride home that had nothing to do with the hockey game.
can we buy that?
No, I'd be happy to just give it to you. I'll share that with you when I send you all the other stuff.
Please do, because I intend on editing this and promoting your site and the work you do and getting it out there to a broader audience. And most importantly is making sure it gets to people and gets used and tried and experimented with. It's one thing for you to be able to do it or Hal to be able to do it, but my God, you can do it. Other coaches at different levels, at every level of coaching, whether they're 30, 40, 50, or 80, like a couple of us are approaching. We need tools, and you never stop learning about this kind of thing. And hence our name, Sharks.
Sharks, I like that name.
And the name originated from a Woody Allen movie. I don't know if you've heard this, Shaun, but I'll repeat it. Tim Bothwell, who coached in the NHL and also coached female Olympic team in the 2006 Torino Olympics, he came up with the name No Dead Sharks. That was our coffee group that would meet weekly before COVID, and then we went online. But he created some wonderful coffee cups with sharks on them, and the name No Dead Sharks. And the Woody Allen movie, Woody is asked by his girlfriend, "What do you think of our relationship?" And Woody says, "Well, it's sort of like a shark. It's not swimming, it's not moving forward, it's not breathing, it's dying." And so the essence of that and the essence of the shark is keep moving forward, keep learning, keep growing. And let's hope we can get on again and have you on anytime. And if you're on, I don't know if Jordan is still with us, but he has done leadership things that are different, above and beyond, not as specifically directed to parents, or players, but as an educator, the leadership work he's done with his staff, and as a coach, what he does with his students is outside the box, and it may be uh, it's almost too much in terms of ability to appreciate that. Now, Jordan, before you leave, I'd like you to talk about some of the things you've done that relate to this, and I'm thinking of your dodging horse ranch visit and that particular tool, which to me, until you do it, you may not appreciate it. I know
Yeah,
I
well,
going out there with you, I have always appreciated the importance of that on communication, Shaun, because the art of communication with the equestrian world and coaching, it really is important. Jordan, go ahead.
well, thanks, Wally. Yes, I've been listening in and just had my camera off so that you weren't interrupted by things that were going on behind me uh, as people are popping in and out. Yeah, the Dodging Horse Ranch one is one that I've used with staff and with my hockey teams. In that, obviously, it's really important that we support diversity in our sport, and knowing Brent Dodging Horse and Sonia, his wife, and Kata, his daughter, who played for me, it was really important, that diversity piece in making sure that everyone valued that piece. And where it came back to is originally was trying to figure out how we can all be better allies. And Brent and Sonia were very gracious in having my entire teaching staff there to do some Indigenous 101 training. But another piece that went along with it was equine assisted learning, doing some team building with horses, and the communication piece with that, and how do you get a 1,200-pound animal to do something that you want it to do, but it doesn't necessarily know exactly what you want it to do, and you have to communicate with it in ways in which that are both verbal and nonverbal and all those pieces. So it really is a fun experience in being outside and doing that, as well as in a beautiful setting that where their place is, just on the west side of Calgary on the Tsuut'ina Nation, and that piece. So the other piece with it was when we were doing it as a team with a team builder, I invited the parents to come along. They couldn't participate with the team doing their team building piece, but what it did was had them go and have opportunity to listen to Brent Dodging Horse and his message on diversity and the pathway that he had in the sport through minor hockey into playing minor pro hockey, and it was what he faced and some of the racism and discrimination and some of those pieces, and then again back to looping it back to what can we do and what the power of allyship is. And I think that's the other piece, is empowering people to be allies. And I think that Brent and Sonia do a great job with that. Another one that goes back to what you were mentioning earlier, Shaun, to do with parents wanting to know that the coach actually knows their child. Being an educator in a school, that's one of the things that I say comes right back to things as simple as report card comments. That right now we have artificial intelligence that will, language bots that'll write anything for us, from emails to novels to whatever. And some teachers are actually using them for report card comments. And my response to that is that absolutely, if you feel that a computer will help you in this task. But I said, ultimately, when it comes down to it at the end, what does a parent want? They want to know that you know their child. So that comment has to be personal enough that when they read it, they know that that's their child that you're talking about, not some just, so it could be anyone from that classroom or a random person walking down the street. So that connection piece is really important. And one of the things that I've done with staff in the past is a day in the life of. with a student. So we have these things called professional learning days, where lots of times people just bring in someone to speak or that sort of thing, or provide teachers time to do things and be of their own devices. But I find that the most important or impactful ones are ones just like your good practice plans, that they're well thought out with a goal in mind. So a day in the life of a student, for knowing how busy students are in their daily lives, especially at the high school level, what I did was I break my staff into purposeful groups. And you know who you're putting together in those groups at that piece, and then placing them in basically a vehicle that they would be traveling together, and then choosing a student, printing off their schedule and saying, these are the courses that they have right now in this semester. Well, here's their address. I want you to drive from the school now and drive to where their home is and figure out what that commute is daily from their home to the school. Okay, now once you're at their home, now let's think, well, it's not just from their home to the school for the entire school day. After that, this kid is involved in anything from hockey to Calgary Stampede show band or things like that, and that they spend this X number of hours at this facility for that event. So you say, now drive to this address and consider that the kid is doing this 3 to 5 times a week. And then, oh, wait, yeah, they also have a part-time job. So they work at this business. Now drive to that business and figure that out. And then circle back to the school and think about how they have to be able to manage their time to be able to do even as little as 1 hour of homework per subject per night. And you start going, this kid's life is so full, it's maybe a little hard for them to balance everything that they're doing, and it might actually stand to reason why they may be falling behind in my course, or look like they're dragging their butt midweek after 3 hockey practices and a dryland session and a whatever. So it's that piece, that getting to know these students as individuals, and knowing that they're more than just the 88 minutes they spend in your classroom. And so I think that that's the same thing that we should be doing a lot of times with players is, no, you're not going to go home and understand everything that's going on in their home life, but get to understand other interests that they have and other activities. Like we had a benchmarking fitness testing session for some kids the other night, and several of the kids were coming for other activities. Some had been on the ice, some had been at dryland already. One had been at lacrosse, and another one was coming in. They texted, they're coming in hot because they're coming from track and field. Well, she's a distance runner, a provincially ranked distance runner at the 2,000 and 3,000, and then knocked off a level 12 on the beep test after being at the track practice. So it's understanding these kids and getting to know them that way. And when you can then refer back to some of those outside or other things to their parents, so that the parents understand that you know their kids. I think that is a very important aspect that we have to understand now, that these parents aren't just giving their kids to us for the time in which we have them during the school day or the time in which we have them at a hockey rink, and only relying on the what did you do at school today when they show up at home and go, nothing.
Yeah.
That sort of thing doesn't happen or isn't taken anymore. They want to, if they get nothing from their kid, they're reaching out to you to try and figure out, well, what did my kid do? So it's really that communication piece is important.
Jordan, I had a thought. You have a professional day. You've got a staff that gets a day off to do that. I'm just thinking, well, gee, how can we get a volunteer coach to find that out, discover that? And one of the things I've learned from working with the national teams over the years is a log sheet, and possibly having your players keep a detailed log of their week and submitting that to you, So you get to actually see what they're doing. And it, what you're doing is so important. I really thank you for that. But it's something that my idea now is, boy, I would say coaches should try to do that, a required log, because at the national level, you have to submit your logs. And they're not different. They're all about your training, your diet, but your feeling state. And these logs, it would take a little bit of time to think about the details of it. But if you understand, I want to get to know you and everything you're involved in. And if you would disclose that with me in the form of a diary, they would, withhold personal information, but they would let you know their schedules and their running about and the difficulty of what they're having to deal with. So the coach would appreciate it more.
Yeah,
Anyway,
those things, that, that log would be interesting. I think that as long as it's used for the, reasons that you're outlining there, and no one ever started making it, a required piece where, there's some sort of accountability measure to do with extra things like they do with the, national teams, because I think that when, Sammy Joe was talking about that piece the one time, she had mentioned that as soon as it turns into a task, an onerous task, it's no longer for the athlete. It turns into being homework, and I would hesitate from that side of things.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of anything you can do to get to know your players better, whether it's a start of the season survey or those sorts of things. I think that it's something that will benefit you and your team along in the long run. And it's kind of interesting. I was reading something the other day, and it was talking about soft skills versus hard skills, and where that terminology actually came from. And it came from the U.S. military. And that hard skills had to do with everything hard, like tanks, guns, aircrafts, boats. And soft had to do with everything dealing with humans. And they said, there's nothing soft about soft skills. It's that just had to do with labeling it that way, and that it's getting to use the appropriate skills in the appropriate place. And I think that coaching and teaching and being better humans just comes hand in hand with being able to communicate, being able to work with one another, and try and meet people where they are. And then I guess ultimately, if you want to get valuable work out of people, they have to know that they are valued and that work is valued.
Jordan, when you mentioned the idea of the log sheets the athletes had to keep, I agree. I know I received them, but I responded to every single one in a personal way. And it usually related to positive imagery in terms of what they were doing and doing well, and educating them that way. I know that it did turn out to being a requirement. If you didn't submit them, well, in fact, they were just checked off. They weren't even read in some cases. And it became a tedious task that didn't make it enjoyable for the athletes. So I even think a week-long schedule is quite extensive, but I just wrote down here, what about one questionnaire about your life, your family life, your hobbies, your day-to-day routines, your part-time jobs, extra interests, just so you get to know about them a little more.
Well, I've used a thing I call teammate bingo, Wally.
Yeah.
That I use it on the bus, and it forces me to get to know the kids over the first little bit before the first bus trip, because I put in little bits and pieces that would fit not any, but different kids, and so then they have to figure out who the player is that fits in what category, and to get a bingo. And so it's one of those pieces that I put on myself. I also do a early survey that's more on how players prefer feedback than anything else, how they feel they learn and how they like feedback. But yeah, I think that a survey of what your interests are and what you do away from the rink, those are great things, anything like that. And I know that a lot of people get into the coaching side of things because they love hockey and the X's and O's. But again, going back to, we all know, those that are on this call know that these pieces will get you further than the X's and O's with the players.
Well, Jordan and Tom, one of the things, as you people talk, I have some brainwaves about ideas. And Peter Whitney had mentioned the fact he had, I think, monthly meetings with his coaches at the university. And when he mentioned that, and he mentioned a pretty high percentage came, it was a different environment. The fact that it was the university, it attracted to them. And Jordan and I actually thought of Mark Owl and the university, and having a monthly meeting, of course, which I wouldn't be able to initiate, but those kinds of things where coaches can talk and learn and grow from one another. And when you have an experienced group like yourselves, you might have a guest speaker, but I think from the group itself, there'll be enough sharing going on. It would be a good idea. You can never do enough about continued learning. So, Hal, we've reached the 2-hour
Yep.
point. So I want to thank you for your Facebook and your pictures of your fishing.
Yeah.
And tell me, do you put all your fish back in the water when you catch them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Unless
I
you're hungry.
grew up, I always ate them. We cooked and ate them.
Yeah,
Never heard
they
of
all-
throw
they
away.
So, boys, I got to run. This was awesome, and Shaun and I will be working together to for me to do a better job with the things he's talking about, and I'll report back as the winter goes along. And as always, we just got to keep swimming, right?
Yep. I'm going to promote Shaun's work with you and what you're doing. It's a laboratory.
Yep.
Continued learning and learning how to do things better. And hopefully we can get some resources and pass them on and become better coaches for it. So,
It's awesome.
all
Thanks.
right, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Have a great weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jordan, for joining us.
Yeah.
Yep. See you guys.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
everybody.